Good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great privilege and pleasure meeting you once again, developing the topic of spiritual science. Our main topic of discussion all along is to demystify the concept of spirituality through the term karma. It's quite an involved subject, and we have been trying to split them into some smaller bits and trying to understand this whole philosophy that drives this whole science of spirituality. In this episode, which is the part 5 of this karma theory, I am going to cover a detailed understanding of how the human species have been created. You may be wondering that when someone does a medical doctor's education, the first thing they start is teaching them the anatomy of human body. They split the dead body and explain to them what individual organs are doing in the whole system called human being. But in the context of spiritual science, we are going to look at not the physical anatomy of the human body internally, but we are going to look at it, the softer aspects of the human body and its own creation. Looking from the Vedic point of view, our Vedic seers have deep dived in understanding the human mechanism in order to get themselves further investigating the truth of this whole creation. So in this process, they have attempted to explain how the human anatomy has to be understood before any aspirant is going to step into the field of spirituality. Many a times the subject of spirituality is shunned by younger generation or middle-aged people because they don't know where to start. So in order to appreciate any branch of science, it is extremely important to start from the basics and then develop the topic systematically. So my earnest attempt in this small seva I am doing is to make the subject of spirituality, which is a complex science, and bring it to the common man, irrespective of what age he belongs to, so that he can make good use of his own life, both in the tranquility point of view as well as in the prosperity in the material domain. Now let us look at what is the Vedic way of explaining the human creation. So our Vedic masters have started from the physical part of our own creation, which is our body, and then they slowly deep dived into the softer aspects of our own creation. It is something like a computer scientist is initially explained the physical construction of a computer at the block level, and then he is explained about the most difficult part of the software side, which require a little more intellectual understanding before a computer scientist can start designing a computer. In the same way, our Vedic seers also started at the gross level of physical body. Let's look at the first aspect of the kosha. The Sanskrit term kosha really means is a sheath. The nearest English word is a sheath, meaning it is a layer. That means when you take an onion, for example, you start peeling an onion one layer from the other, thinking that there is something inside, and then you ultimately discover that the onion comprises of multiple layers, but ultimately you don't find anything internally. So in the same way, Vedic seers have started with the grossest level of understanding the human body, which can be logically a starting point. When you say kosha, it means a layer. And when you use the term gross in English is a poor translation of a Sanskrit word called subtle, which is Sukshama. Sukshama Buddhi, what they call it in Sanskrit. That means anything which is in a physical form, which can be perceived by the five senses of human being, they are called gross objects. That means you can see them, you can touch them, you can smell them, and so on. That is what is called gross objects in the Vedic terms. In the case of subtle objects which cannot be perceived by the five senses, like for example, a software residing inside a computer cannot be seen, but its presence can be felt. That means for anyone to understand and comprehend a software, he needs a Sukshama Buddhi. That means he needs to have a subtle understanding of something which cannot be perceived with five objects. So with this background, let us understand what you mean by the grossest level of our own creation as human being, which is called Annamaya Kosha. So pardon me for using the roots of Vedic terms, which are very essential for us to appreciate before we can deep dive into the science of spirituality to understand the science of karma later. So what do you mean by Annamaya Kosha? Annam really means is food. So this human body is a creation and sustained by food basically. That means when we are born, we might have been about 2.5 to 3 kgs, and now we must have grown to 75 or 85 kg. So that means this whole growth of the body came from the kind of a food that we have eaten. Maybe initially mother's milk, and later on the various kind of food that came from the nature. Since this body is brought and sustained by food, it is called Annamaya Kosha. That means it is the first grossest layer to understand what are we made up of. But you may be wondering why we are trying to get into this details, because when you buy a computer or a mobile phone or a smartphone or even a motor car, you would like to go through the user manual and try to understand what is the functionality of that particular gadget so that you can effectively use them. In the same way, if you want to take full advantage of your own creation, you need to understand what are you made up of, not from the anatomy point of view like a medical doctor would do, but a spiritual doctor will try to understand. So Annamaya Kosha really means this physical body. What it comprises of is the next question. So the physical body has got two major aspects of functionality. One is the input devices, the other one is the output devices. Now what do you mean by input devices and output devices? When you look at a computer, for you to talk to the operating system of the computer, you need certain input devices through which you try to give your command. For example, you have a keyboard, you have got a mouse, and you may be having a voice recognition facility in the software, then you may be using a microphone, etc. Those are all called the input devices. Same way, human beings have been created with 5 input devices, which are our 5 senses, meaning we are able to obtain data from outside world through our eyes in the form of sight, in the form of smell through our nose buds, and in the form of sound we are able to hear through our ears, and through sensation on our skin, through touches, and through taste buds in our tongue, and so on and so forth. That means these 5 sense organs are identifying the external world in order to get some information about what is happening in this whole universe. So these 5 input devices ultimately bring certain data to some inside operating system which tries to interpret the external world. You may be wondering why we are seeing all this, because it is very important for us to deep dive into the science of spirituality later. So the 5 input devices are given basically as a survival mechanism. If you don't have these 5 input devices, we will not be able to recognize the kind of a threat coming from the external situations and act so that we can have the self-preservation of escaping from danger. So these 5 sense organs are the input devices, and they are capable of getting some external information, and then we process them inside. So this whole system of input devices is a part of the Annamaya Kosha. The other aspect, we have 5 output devices. Now these 5 output devices, as Vedic masters have explained, are when you want to take some action in the external world, we can take action through only these 5 output devices. Let us look at it, what they are. We have got 2 arms, 2 hands, through which we can carry out certain output of performing an action. We have 2 legs by which we will be able to move around in this world by running away from danger or carrying out some punya karma or whatever it is. So hands are one output device and legs are the other output device. And the third output device is called our vocal cord. Now at this point in time, I am articulating my thoughts and ideas on the subject of spirituality using my vocal cord, through which the vibration and the sound is created in a particular language, and it is getting recorded, and thereby you are able to access this information. So vocal cord is one of the output devices. So now we have seen 3 output devices, essentially our hands, our legs, our vocal cord. The 4th output device is our excretion mechanism. What do you mean by excretion mechanism? Whenever our body has to dispose of some toxic matter, it uses the excretion mechanism. That means our kidney functions by segregating certain toxic elements in the blood and pass it on to urine, and then our intestine and digestive systems are converting the food into energy and then disposes of the waste, and so on and so forth. That means we have an excretion system, which is an output device which is taking certain actions of making this body to respond to the rest of the world. That is the reason when a child is threatened, it passes urine. So it shows that these excretion mechanisms are activated when certain kind of emotions are gone through. So the last output device is the genital, through which the procreation happens. So for some historical reasons, the nature has felt that this species have to continue to exist by procreating themselves. So in order to make the procreation happen, a sexuality has been created, and then genital actions are undertaken by the various organs respectively. So these are the 5 output devices. So that means body comprises of 5 input devices which are helping to perceive the world, and 5 output devices which are disposing or initiating certain actions in this world. So this is the first kosha, which is very important for us to understand, which is called Annamaya Kosha, because this sheath has been created from the food that we have eaten, and hence it is called Annamaya Kosha. So going forward, we will continue to deep dive into the most subtle realms of human creation, which are very important for us to understand, so that we can effectively utilize our own resources of life for the betterment of our own life as well as the people around. I hope these sessions are deepening your understanding of the science of spirituality and its building blocks, which is very important for us to later on develop the topic of karma as we go along. I appreciate your patronage and continued support for spreading the science of spirituality so that there can be a harmony prevail in our future, in our community. Thank you very much for your patient listening. I pray God for giving you and your family a great health and prosperity in the coming years. Take care. See you soon. God bless you.